What's up, everybody? I know a lot of you have been asking about mobility, you've been asking about warm-up ideas, so I'm just going to take you through my typical warm-up, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so the first thing I do before every training session and the last thing I do after every training session is use these gravity boots, some body inversion or spinal decompression. Our spine gets compressed by putting a heavy barbell on your back and squatting, sitting a lot, being hunched over at a computer. That's all compressing your spine. So this allows gravity to naturally realign your spine and fix your posture. So Dr. Gravity is my chiropractor. It also improves circulation throughout your entire body, mainly in your head, but it feels really, really good. Okay, so you'll notice here that I don't do a lot of foam rolling. I usually don't foam roll unless I'm feeling really sore. I'll get right into stretching and moving around. So here you see I'm stretching out my ankles. I take my shoes off, point my toes straight forward, I squat all the way down, and I bounce around, really trying to loosen up my ankle joint and my Achilles, just bouncing around side to side, front and back. Then I'll move into a calf stretch, and you'll notice I'll bend my knee here in a minute and I'll really try to focus on my ankle and Achilles again. I don't do a whole lot of static stretching. I do some obviously here because I love static stretching. It feels really good for me. So I would literally just lay there for way too long. My warm-up would be a lot longer than it should be. So I try to incorporate a lot of movement into my warm-up. Here I go with the bend and reach, really working on spinal flexion and spinal extension. So I bend over, allow my spine to round over, flex my stretch my hamstrings out, and then I extend at the top. So I'm really trying to get a lot of movement in my spine during this warm-up. You'll notice I didn't speed any of this up. This is just straight through. This takes me about 10 minutes. So for those of you who say you don't have time to warm up or don't have time for a good warm-up, I don't believe it. This takes me about 10 minutes, so it should be the same for you. I'll move into the hamstring stretches. So I put a band around my leg. I call this the ballistic hamstring stretch. I'll stretch my leg all the way down, and then I'll let the band snap my leg back up. And that stretches out my hamstring a lot better than I could if I was just pulling on my leg or just raising my leg in the air. I also try to flex that glute at the bottom as I bring my leg down. Get some glute activation in. Then I'll go side to side, left to right. Stretch on my IT band. It even goes into my glutes and my adductors, my groin, going from side to side. You'll also notice I have a sweet crotch hole in my pants, but don't get your hopes up, I'm wearing shorts underneath. So I don't know what the hell this is called, but it kind of just happened naturally. I put my leg up and then I tip my body so that my foot lies flat on the ground. And then I reach my arm overhead. This does a great job of stretching out my glute, my hip, my QLO, my oblique. It feels really, really good. And honestly, I could lay here all day. So you'll see I'll switch, put my leg up like that, and then tip so that that top foot lays flat on the ground. And I'll reach overhead like that. All right, some more bending over, more squatting. So squatting, really trying to push my elbows against the inside of my knees and push my knees out, really loosen up my hips. I really just bounce around, try to get comfortable in that squat position. So when I come up, I round my back over, and then when I get back down in squat position, I try to extend and get into a good squat position. I do this with no shoes on, really try to stretch out my ankles with all these squatting movements that you'll see me do here in the warm-up. So as you can see there, flat back, good squat position. I'll come up and I'll round over, get a hamstring stretch in there too. All right, go into a lunge stretch. I put a stick on my back and I do a lunge. Really relax down at the bottom position, let your back knee touch the ground. I really try to sink my hips forward and then I lean towards the up knee to make that stretch a little more intense. When I'm at the bottom there, I also squeeze the glute, flex the glute of that leg that's down. That helps loosen up my hip flexor by activating my glute. I do some leg swings. I get a good hamstring stretch out of the front portion and a hip flexor stretch when my leg's back. It also really just loosens up my hip joint. I warm up my full body every training session I do, upper and lower. A lot of people make the mistake of not doing a lower body warm up because they're doing, bench press that day. Just because you're not doing lower body that day does not mean it's not going to benefit you. It's going to help you improve your mobility, and when you squat tomorrow, you're going to feel that much better. So I would suggest warming up your lower body and your upper body every training session. Here I'm doing some lateral leg swings, IT band, glute, groin, adductor, going side to side. Going to some overhead squats. So here, again, just bouncing around, really trying to get comfortable in that squat position. I bounce around and I jam my knees forward just to stretch out my ankles even more. This also really activates the muscles in my upper back, trying to hold my chest up and not round over. You see there, I pop my feet out and I widen my stance. I'll do 5 and then I'll widen my stance a little bit more, and really just trying to open up my hips. All right, now I go into some upper body stretches. Neck circles, I love doing these. So I grab a stick with an underhand grip, completely relax my shoulders, and I roll my head clockwise and then counterclockwise. Really big circles here. I feel this in my neck, my traps, my shoulders, all the way down to my hands. Really relax your shoulders when you're doing this. Now I move on to a hand, bicep, and shoulder stretch. As you can see here, this is how it's done. Someone recently told me that this actually stretches out your nerves. I didn't know you could stretch out your nerves, but apparently you can. A little pit sweat for you. So tight hands and tight wrists does affect tightness in your shoulders. So really focus on stretching out your hands, your fingers, and your wrists, and it carries over into your shoulder flexibility big time. It's all connected. Here I move into a lat stretch. I grab a band and I stretch my lat out just like this. Tight lats really negatively affects your overhead position, your overhead press. So tight lats, again, is going to affect your overhead press. So I really loosen up my lats so that I can get into a good overhead position. Shoulder dislocations, I grab a stick with an overhand grip. I keep my back neutral, my arms straight, and I go from the front all the way to the back. You'll see here, I'll bring my grip width in a little bit. The closer you are, the harder it is. Don't be stupid with this. Don't actually try to dislocate your shoulder by going with too narrow of a grip. It shouldn't be extremely uncomfortable. You see, I'll adjust again and I'll go a little bit more narrow. I'll usually do 15 to 20 of these. All right, I call this shaking my shit. So if you guys want to do this at your commercial gym and they don't ask what the hell you're doing, you say, I'm shaking my shit. This is kind of like a boxer or an MMA fighter before a fight. Just loosening, getting rid of all that tension in my head, my neck, my shoulders, my hands, my wrists, my elbows. Really just shaking all that tension out. I got this from Elliot Hulse. This here could be the Vanderlei Silva stretch. So I stretch out my hands, my wrists, my elbows. I let all the tension out of my upper body. I want my muscles to feel warm and loose, not cold and tight. Warm and loose muscles are fast muscles, especially if you're an Olympic weightlifter. All right, and I finish up with some roly-polies. So as you can see, lots of movement in my warm-up. I do upper body and lower body every day, regardless of what I'm doing that day. And it really improves my training sessions big time. So that's it, guys. I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed. Always remember, tread on time.